Welcome back. December 27th, Birds of a Feather, the co-ed edition. Starting off with your girl AJ, the Suburban Princess. Hey ho. It is now 4 days away from a new year, and we are still complaining about the same crap. But the difference is from last we potted, we were discussing another loss. So this time we're discussing a win that feels like a loss. Welcome to Birds of a Feather, where everybody has the same reaction to the Eagles beating the Giants. Ho hum, they're supposed to beat them. It would have been more eventful had this been the 49ers game, or if this was the Dallas game, or hell, even last Monday night's horrific Seahawks game that ended pretty much in the most embarrassing fashion as it started. Well, actually, no, it started pretty well. But let's just be honest. As much as we're happy that they won, they were supposed to beat the Giants. The fact that they even looked a little bit competitive is still a little bit alarming, but there were a lot of bright spots, I thought, throughout the game. I do think that Keely Ringo is going to evolve more and more. I'm definitely waiting for Avante Maddox to be back. I mean, all the talk this week, of course, is probably for competitive reasons, I'm sure, but most likely he will be playing again versus Arizona this weekend at home at 1 o'clock at a normal football time, is all the media people have been saying, because we know that the media hates. They've been hating how much they've been going back and forth with these primetime games within 2-3 weeks of each other or 5 days of each other. We should be thankful this year that the Eagles were put on this much in prime time, because that basically was saying that they were the team to watch, but they also were coming off of the Super Bowl. So we know that when you come off of the Super Bowl and you almost win it, you are going to become the prime time target. Now, mind you, I'm glad that we're not one of those teams that are so horrific to watch that we have all these primetime slots that you don't know why. And there are a lot of teams that had a lot of slots this year that probably didn't deserve them. But it comes down to the same kind of bowl of teams that if they're not on the bubble, there's a lot of teams that are tied for wild card, if not in the hunt. I mean, it's starting to narrow down even more so. I think that the biggest question mark this year has been Kansas City, surprisingly, now becoming 9-6, and knowing that with Eric Bieniemy in Washington and their team obviously not anywhere close to making it, do we have to talk about how important offensive coordinators are to an effective, consistent run game, offensive scheme, all that? Andy Reid always called the shots here in Philly, but with him in KC, he now has 2 rings. Granted, he had Bieniemy then. Now he doesn't have Bieniemy, and now this team has been losing 3 games in a row. Now the Eagles just got off of their skid and finally got their butts up to win 33-25 against the Giants in their black unis. But the reality is, it was probably the best game offensively that they've done pretty much all year, which is sad because usually around this time of year, with them only having 3 games left, you usually don't really need to even see the full offense this much. The fact that they need to play all 3 of these games is saying a lot about this season. It's also saying that, I don't know, you start to think maybe last year was a fluke, but I don't even want to go there, because I just also think that a lot of the players that they're no longer there played key roles that without them being here now is exposing a lot of deficiencies on both offense and defense. The obvious thing to bitch about, like we've been bitching about all season, has been the coordinator switch, which probably wouldn't have been a bad thing if we had seen any improvement after the first, like, what, 6 or 7 games. Um, Even when the Eagles were 10-1, I think a lot of us were still kind of talking at the sides of our mouths about how it doesn't look right and how Jalen doesn't look right and how increasingly frustrated AJ Brown became. All of these things have tied down to why they are 11-4, not the worst record in the world, but seeing that my boy Lamar and them are now 11-3 and we're not. To see that Dallas just got beat and Ravens beat San Francisco, it just shows you that anything can happen. This is definitely a week-to-week league. Not that we didn't think that even with the Eagles were good last year. It's just that there were a lot of things that worked in the Eagles' favor, even when they ended up losing that one stupid Washington game due to carelessness and fumbles and stuff like that. The fumbles have definitely eaten away at any kind of progress this year due to Jalen's fumbling, due to any other team's fumbling. I mean, any other member of the team's fumbling, but especially Jalen's because he is normally, um, he's usually supposed to be the most consistent of the offense. Um, Offensive line has gone through a lot of shifts, but considering how Suapeta has stepped in when, either Lane was down or um, Jurgens was out for a while, and they had to use. I think they even used Moro Jomo at one point. But there are a lot of players that have subbed in for where normally um, backups usually don't help; they make it worse. I mean, I always, once they put in that one lineman every time they put him in, and I told Eddie this last pod that I was not excited about him being the emergency backup, but I mean, you got to do what you got to do. He actually got better within that game, even though they still lost against the Seahawks. But with Lance out this past weekend, it didn't really do anything. But the timing was clearly off, especially with Kelsey getting another false start, and there were just overall issues with Mailata for a while. So even though the O lines and the D lines sometimes get shuffled around when they're missing players, they're able to reset and not necessarily always dictate a win or a loss, but clearly the other things that don't help, DBs not being able to get picks, and they've had opportunities. Even with Slay out after he got his knee cleaned, which I have an issue with his timing and choosing to do that. Whether or not it had to do with Matt Patricia taking over Desai's job is honestly remains to be seen. We'll never really truly know that answer because no one's ever going to put that out there. Um, I just think it comes right down to when things shuffle, they have to adjust quicker. And sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. The 3-game losing streak was basically lack of effort, fatigue, and fumbles, interceptions. The interception just happened with Goddard and Hurts was just a result of Goddard slipping. I mean, Goddard fit back in just like he normally does. There was a little bit of chatter I know about them people saying he wasn't blocking as much or well because he's trying to still watch out for his forearm. But at this point, with Goddard still kind of ailing, but not really, I think that he's more of a passing liability as opposed to a blocking now because that's why I assume Calcaterra got some love this past Monday's game because he definitely helped when it when a play went to crap because a high snap and Jalen had to go and fight for it, and he threw the ball, looked like he was going to throw it away. Calcaterra got it just in time to get the first down. The awareness that Calcaterra had to have in that weird, really awkward moment was definitely complimentary. And then he also got some key first downs. Even with Goddard available, that was a good look. Stoll came in handy at times, maybe not shining as bright as Calcaterra for that game, but the point is, as much as the tight ends try to be helpful, I still don't understand why they're not using Albert O at all. Like they were saying that we got him for speed and all this other stuff, but who knows again why that's not the same issue with Penny. Rashad Penny, they haven't used him except for one time. And after he couldn't block at that one moment for Jalen that one time, we never saw him again. So this coaching staff has these issues that are clearly starting to show in game time, and they're clearly showing afterwards when they really try to avoid questions or talk around things. And it's getting to the point where it's showing an embryonic development of coordinators right now because of the switch. Not having Gannon, not having Shane Steichen anymore. I really think the one we miss, obviously, out of both of them is Shane. But at this point, do we? Because here I was naively going for Brian Johnson because he already knew Jalen. But what we're learning is that Johnson is not very good at adjusting in the middle of the game with the offensive scheme. And the offensive scheme uses a lot of personnel that have shown that wide receiver screens and all those things don't really help if you don't have good enough personnel at that moment. If you're subbing people for other players that really were doing fine in the first half of the game, and then you suddenly put somebody else in there, which doesn't make any sense, we got to question why we used Boston Scott after Britton Covey made some wonderful returns last game, and then all of a sudden Boston Scott was in there. And then the accident between him and Oz happened because Oz got pushed in the back and ran into Boston Scott, which caused a fumble for the Giants. So they were able to score a second time. But these kind of errors haven't happened with special teams. Special teams has stood up a lot. And considering how they lost Sean Bradley in preseason, a lot of guys that usually were special teams experts, should I say, or extraordinaires. We all know that Sean, whether he gets back on the team or not, or if they decide to use him as a trading block next year, I don't know how many years he has left on his contract, but I know that if he was supposed to be a backup linebacker, he really wasn't someone they were considering using again because they haven't really put him in that position in a while. I really feel like the issue again is exposing Howie's decision to not value the linebacker position more than ever now. Before they could hide it, they obviously had other players on the outside that at the time could fill that void, namely one of them being Avante and Slay. Now, if they don't have Slay next year, I'm fine with that too, but they definitely have to get a veteran corner. I don't know if Bradbury is going to last another season because I think what he's shown this year is his ineptitude to adjust on the fly. His timing is off. Right after they paid him, for some reason, he did not seem as valuable as he was when they, got him mid-year last year. I don't know what changed. I don't know if that's obviously part of the coordinator issue as well. A lot of things you want to question Brian Johnson for why they're not gelling on offense, but there's also just the process of change not always working for everybody. Change is not good for most people. I'm not good with change. I can imagine what it's like for most of the wide receivers now, especially with Oz kind of outplaying Quez, even though when Quez was in there, he really didn't make much of an impact. Sometimes things open up for other players and close for others and close for some. Because at this point, what Brian Johnson's coordination has shown is that they're not really coordinated. It has shown that both the offense and the defense are yards apart, but the defense hasn't really been any better simply because now, Jalen Carter hasn't really had really good games lately. He hasn't been making that much impact like he was earlier in the season. Don't know if that was because of the decide switch as well. They haven't been getting hardly any sacks. They were lucky that they got the one last week against DeVito, but they didn't get any against once they put his replacement in there, which I forget who it was. I'm blanking. I'm probably going to remember as soon as I stop recording. But the point is, it's been hard to get sacks for the defense. It's also been hard for the DBs to recover picks without it being a fumble that bounced their way. Speaking of Jalen Carter obviously got that one lucky return from Dallas, but that was the only one little gift they gave them because obviously Dallas won that game. But that was a rare happening. Prior season, Josh Sweat had got a pick off of Dak. So it became you kind of thought if it was happening again with Carter that was a sign that they were going to turn things around and beat the Cowboys, and it didn't happen. So there are things that not following through, not finishing the plays. I think that's some of the wide receivers issues too. I think sometimes AJ may not be on the same page with Hurts. I think that sometimes even Devonta's same thing, although I feel like Devonta's been getting more beat up this year as well. AJ just had a injury Monday night, but I think also he was injured before that because he didn't seem as quick breaking off from people as he did. So who knows? With any guys who work as hard as all of our wide receivers do and all of our offensive guys as well as defensive guys work, you could have injuries that stem from just a simple weight day. Maybe warm-ups. Maybe you tug something when in warm-ups and you didn't want to be put on the injury list or, pulled back, so you just went through it. There's a lot of reasons why guys can suddenly come up ailing out of nowhere in the middle of the game and you had no idea where the injury started. I mean, we're still racking our brains as to how Jalen even hurt his knee to begin with. We want to pinpoint the first game. We want to pinpoint the second week, the Vikings game. We don't know when it happened. But because it's not evident exactly when it happened, the point is he's been not running as much unless he has to, because that's how also stagnant the offense has been. So if you've ever noticed him taking off, it's usually because he sees a clear lane or he's getting impatient with waiting for wide receivers to be open, so he just goes for it, which I've noticed is what pissed me off a lot this season with Jalen. He does seem more impatient, which to me goes back to the reason why the offensive coordinator has become such a target of such vitriol, because we fans are seeing with our eyes this very stagnant offense. And we thought that if someone who knows Jalen's tendencies, why would it be hard for him to direct the whole offense as a whole? But it's a totally different position when you're just a QB coach as opposed to an offensive coordinator, especially if probably in your other ear you're hearing the coach correct you on something you set up that he didn't like, or vice versa, or if you're telling him like, well, this is what we talked about and the scenario just didn't work out, coach has to go up there and say, well, that was all me, but in reality, it could have been all Brian. And that's one of those areas too that we can't even really pinpoint either, because, clearly Sirianni is reacting to every play, but you don't necessarily see you know, a plan right in front of his face, but you see him looking down and stuff. You see him pointing, you see him apparently this Monday, he was yelling at other coordinators when he saw players coming back to the field. There was a lot of confusion going on. And it seems like even through it all, there's just a bad vibe going through these last 4 weeks. I think the grind of having all those games in a short amount of time. I think also, too, there's just a lack of trust developing in this squad as a whole, offense and defense. I don't know if Matt Patricia exactly is working per se, but I mean, how much more do we think he's going to be able to help this late part in the season when to us fans, it might look like no different from what Desai schemed, The players have to execute what they want them to do. And if the players' instincts are off or not understanding what the coordinator wants them to see, then you'll have plays that just don't make any sense, or you'll have plays that are half-ass executed. Like sometimes you just don't understand why, that player was there when Y was the one who clearly had the advantage. You know, sometimes I still will always say that Hurts will throw when he wants to throw. I don't think he always follows the plan. I think it also, how can you coach somebody who goes by instinct? If he feels like he knows where his wide receiver is, or if he doesn't, he's going to either run and get out the pocket before it collapses, or he's going to just try his luck and QB draw. Yes, they work sometimes, but I do believe sometimes he was also forcing it. And I think that was kind of obvious. I didn't watch any of the latest pressers today because I wasn't really interested. Because at this point, it's like guys can't say anything more. There's people are trying to drum up the whole, Gannon's going to be coming back to Philly, but Gannon won't be a threat. It'll be if the Eagles decide to overthink the way they execute plan and lose to the Cardinals. I don't see the Cardinals being a threat. Even if Kyler Murray gets 400 yards, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win. I think what Jalen's also probably learning is that he does not have to bulk up, 200 to 300 yards sometimes a game. Sometimes it doesn't require his arm to be throwing that much, because clearly you can make it worse when you keep throwing and there's nothing out there. If there's one thing from all these 4 losses, is that every loss was annoying for a different reason. The Jets game, they were just not with it from beginning to end. They only had one really good series in that whole game, and then everything else just pretty much blew up in their face. So clearly there was just no prep done or no prep taken seriously for that game. And then the last 3, San Francisco just beat them. I mean, they let them in, and then they just continued to snowball. And then Dallas, I think, was just a result of the fatigue from the 49ers game, and probably also just not taking Dallas seriously for whatever reason. And possibly just because the earlier game they won and we were down some more players. So I think they just had more of an advantage. Plus, Dak was playing a lot cleaner at this point, and within those 3-week skids. So I just felt like it kind of just leaned to Dallas no matter how you looked at it. They still could have won. I mean, every game they could have won. that they lost. But that's what makes it annoying on top of everything else is that even the games that they should have won, um, you still questioned even the wins, because not every win was sexy. Not every win was like dominating. They didn't beat anybody in double digits. Every game was like within a touchdown or at least like 8 points. So I think that's another thing. They're not really taking it to this limit and beyond like they were last year. But hence, you go back to the coordinator. If they're not trusting what they're seeing, if they're not trusting the philosophy that these coordinators are um, trying to put out there for them, then it doesn't matter how they win. If they win and they're just happy they're winning, that's kind of a red flag because that they're basically saying we're just trying to survive the season and go home. Like they're saying we're not going to do it right now. This is not going to be the year. And I'm okay with finally admitting out loud they're not going to the Super Bowl this year. I'm okay with it. Like I want Lamar to get MVP at this point. I mean, clearly Hurts is not really Hurts this year. But I also think that part of his ego is getting hit a lot this year with how easy and how difficult it has become to maintain sanity and consistency and humility throughout this weird process they're going through right now. But I think that Lamar has also been in the trenches long enough to not at least try to get one good year under him where he can possibly get over the hump that he did during his first full year after he was a rookie that got him the MVP. So I totally understand the Christian McCaffrey is a possibility or Tyreek Hill, all those people out there who aren't QBs who could possibly be an MVP candidate. I get it. But I definitely am rooting for Lamar when it comes between him and Hurts. And if Hurts is clearly not going to be the same guy, if this team is not going to be that team that gets them to Vegas, then I root for Lamar. And, I'm still Hurts Brown all day. But I just think right now we're just seeing the other sides of being a competitive team to being a growing and developing new team. And I should have known from beginning videos when, OTAs were starting and training camp was starting. When they first even showed Coach Sirianni discussing having to deal with taking new roles and stuff like that, I kind of had a hint that that was probably not going to be good that he even included that to be shown on the video because this is not the city that handles change good at all. So, but it was fitting to say it because the obvious change was going to be the coordinators because they were the major switches, and we weren't sure. We there was no way we would honestly know whether or not this team was going to look different until actual game day. Um, preseason doesn't really tell you much anyway. You're just happy to see people. We got our first little view of Jalen Carter and DeAndre Swift, but that was kind of a given that they were living up to their own hype. But now that this team is finally, as they always like to say, faced adversity, um, I think what Brock Purdy just recently said in the 49ers last recent loss was that, you have to look yourself. We always hate look in the mirror stuff too, but it is true. Who are you trying to be? What are you trying to accomplish? Can you handle not being the man at this moment? And I think that all those questions he had said in his presser, I'm paraphrasing, but for the most part, he was asking the right questions out loud during his presser because he was basically saying, like, okay, now what? Are you going to just go to shit just because you're not comfortable losing? Or are you going to actually pinpoint where you're losing focus and how you can stop the bleeding? Because this was exactly what the Eagles had to do this past Monday night. They had to figure out where they're not pushing and where they need to stop pushing. Because clearly, when QBs are frustrated, no different from Hurts and any other, Josh Allen, Dak, all of them, when they start pressing, there's a reason because they're trying to overcompensate for something that's not working. And usually, when you press, whether you're QB or any other player, it's almost like you might as well just like running into a wall over and over again because it's not gonna, you can't make everybody play like you. So if you're throwing to wide receivers and you're just missing them, you're just gonna miss them. You can yell at them, you can not talk to them, but it's not gonna make the route work any better. There are just some days you're just not connected. And Mike Missinelli, shout out to him because hopefully after the new year, I will invite him to Birds of a Feather. But I'm going to be doing my 5 questions podcast. So it won't be Birds of a Feather, it'll be 5 questions, but I'll be excited if that does develop. So stay tuned to my channel. But anyway, back to Mike Missinelli's podcast, which you can stream on Spotify as well. He basically was talking about how this team is just disjointed. And I agree. They're disjointed because there's a lot of things that they've never had to probably really deal with as a team until now. And so where they thought that they could probably patch it up quickly or they could just switch certain ideals and it'll just fall into place and it hasn't, that's where the frustration is coming from. And now you're just looking at every player like, I thought you could do this. I thought you could do this, or the coach is like, you tell me this all the time, but look at what's happening, and we're starting to see Sirianni, emote. I mean, although he's been emoting since day one, so let's just stop acting like that's new. It may get on people's nerves, but I also think this team is very vulnerable, so everybody can just pinpoint all the mistakes right now. But Sirianni is a coach for Philly simply because he is emotional. We had years of Andy Reid, so you're welcome. With that said, if it continues to be like this into the new year next year, I don't see him lasting more than another season or so because I feel like every coach outside of Andy Reid has had like a 3 to 5 year term, and then if they're not producing quick enough, then because everything kind of reflects on Howie as well, because Howie at one point probably was on a short leash too until they just decided to re-up him just cuz. But that's also just familiarity. I mean, if there was even a slight chance of a new GM coming here, it would have to have been like, whispered and chattered a while ago, and there has been no candidates. So, unfortunately, even if Lori was thinking of somebody to replace Howie, I don't even know if he's going to be here before that happens. It might be his son in charge by that time. So, but I digress. The point is just when things aren't working, they're not going to work any better if you force it. Um, as much as I'm happy for that win, there were a lot of good things outside of the lack of productivity on the defensive backside. Shout out to Sidney Brown too, by the way, because I do think he's gonna get better. I do think he's starting to see he's kind of overcompensating by speed. We know he can hit people, but I think now he has to have targeted aggression. And I think the problem is now he's starting to rush past people. Reed is having a hard time just because he's in a space where he's not used to being, or at least without help. Clearly, one of the Giants' touchdowns was because he was out of position or he wasn't paying attention. And I think sometimes some players just play based on who's usually around them. And if they don't have that player like Slade being out, maybe that kind of threw him off and that could have threw Keeley off or whoever was on that side. But one of those touchdowns was because of Reed. And there's special teams, like I said, had been doing great. Covey had been busting it out, almost took it past 40 yards. But to go away from him the rest of the game, I don't understand. Because unless he pulled something, they could have just kept having him return, because eventually they were probably going to kick away from him anyway. But when they had Boston there, it's like I give Boston at least 2 games where he eventually will bust a return because he's done it before. Because he was like Sproles as a replacement. So the few times that he has busted, whether it been preseason or just one random game toward the end, he can eventually get a punt return to TD. So they have to just decide if that was just worrying about fatigue or just them trying to be cute, which I sometimes hate because there are times even at the red zone, this has been smacking them in the face all year. Stop being cute. Just stick to what you know. Stop switching personnel at the weirdest times of the game and making everything look stupid if it doesn't work. And then have to say something, redundant and stupid at the end in your presser, like, oh, we meant to do that, or we should have done that. Yeah, you should have done that. We're not going to sit there and act like on 3rd and 1, like you should never go for the tush push regardless, or brotherly shove, whatever the heck they're still calling it at this point. But them missing that call annoyed a lot of fans as well, because that's usually where you stick it, you put it in there. And I think that they felt like they would try to get cute and throw. But I mean, knowing if you've been basically barely getting any kind of scoring going for a while, that's where you should have just stuck to what you know. And I think they have the problem of overthinking when they're considered predictable and when they're not. Because whether or not you know the fans are ready for it at that point, that's the thing to do. I'm sorry if it looks boring, but they're calling you predictable as a whole, not on certain plays. Certain plays, especially the tush pushes, which you're known for, you're the only team that does it successfully. So that to me is nothing wrong with being predictable for that. If that's the move that works for you and no one can stop it, be predictable. But when it comes to just the screens and trying to do these wide tosses to the right or letting Jalen just run throughout like 3, 4 plays when all he had to do was just freaking throw not even across his body, but check down or whatever. It's stuff like that is predictable. Like you don't know what to do from play to play, so you just stick to the same stupid things that you think people aren't going to believe you're going to do. No, keep running the ball or just throw. You know what I mean? Like, because sometimes I think even Jalen gets in his head and feels like he has to do. That's why he messed up on running out of bounds recently in this last game because he started to overthink. And that's usually not even like him. He usually just either runs out of bounds and does it even if he didn't have to, or he just takes it to the hole. And that was the one moment where he overthought it, and I think he realized it. And that was why it was so easy for him to be like, "That was my bad," because I don't know where my brain went. But that alone is so uncharacteristic of him. So yes, they are disjointed. I do like that word. Um, let's see how they look. I shouldn't even say let's see how we look. They're going to look the same. There's going to probably still be those annoying plays. There's obviously plays that they just don't know how to divert from when they don't have an answer. If they're not the scripted plays, they're really spitballing. And you can always tell. It's usually in the third quarter when they start having that lull that they start putting in stupid personnel at the weirdest times. Although shout out to Kenny G because he was up in there. You know, there was a lot of plays that normally I would have said just keep the ball at DeAndre, but they throw KG in here and like they said, if he didn't execute, it would look stupid, but he did, and it helped him score. Um, so yeah, there are times that their stupid plays could totally be avoided, and there seems to be a confusion as to when or not they do this play and use this person. That's the stuff that they got to get out of, And I'm glad that we're still in regular season because maybe these are obvious kinks that they can work out before playoffs. But I mean, I don't think any fan would disagree of saying one and done because that's how I feel. I feel like one and done, and I'm fine with being wrong. But I have to keep it funky and just say that right now this team is not giving me, you know, 13-4, and I want more. You know what I mean? It's giving me, we'll see. It's giving me, we will see, because I do not see them having to go through San Francisco and winning in San Francisco at all. You know, if they do, it'll only be because there's injuries and because Purdy's not working right. Period. Now, mind you, if they if they knock Purdy upside his head again, we might have a shot. But even then, you still got Dwebo, and you still got Kittle, and you still got what's his name, Bosa. You still got tons of players. Ayuk. There's tons of weapons they have there. So there's no really shutting them down unless they have that many more injuries by the time playoffs roll around. Because other than that, full force right now, our team cannot handle them. And they love that because they got their just reward coming here and beating up on us. So let's not be shocked if they go against San Francisco first round and they're out. Let's just embrace reality. It doesn't have to be negative. It can just be realistic. But in the meantime, fly eagles fly all day. And, bird gang up in here. I'm always going to root for my birds and I'm always going to root for the Ravens as my backup team because everybody should have a backup team. It's just been a long time since we've been having an early exit feeling. And, once you can't finish off, a Super Bowl that you won 6 years ago, it's like 5 years ago, excuse me, you just start getting that feeling that it's even harder to go back. And it is. And we're not even playing. And I think us fans know that. So you can imagine what the players feel, especially now that everything's changed so quickly. I'm sure there's a lot of them are thinking like, we're not going to get back now. because this whole mentality has screwed up this whole team. I'm sure some guys are spiraling mentally. They just don't want to say it. But you have to keep acting like every week is a new opportunity. And it is, you know, come Saturday, they could look like the Saturday. The heck am I doing? Sunday. See, all the switching of times and games is annoying me. Um, they could totally look like a team that wants to ignore these last three losses. You know what I mean? So they could come out with their hair on fire. You know, I don't think Gannon will be part of that motivation. I think it'll be more for the media and for fans to talk. But I really think now that they've gotten that win from Monday night, they'll probably be a little fatigued. It'll probably start off kind of slow, but I have a feeling by like fourth quarter, it might be another 30 pluser win. I mean, 30 point for them, not total. I think that they're going to win in the 30-point range somehow. But um, you can say it's just the Cardinals. They also play the Giants again the following week. And Jalen may not even have to play all that game. It might be Mariota. Um, but whether or not this is a very impressive last part of the stretch, it doesn't matter. They just have to win. That's the focus. Now I'm going to go watch the Sixers with a Embiid-less team. They're now on two-game losing streak, but they're 20-8 right now in their division. So if they do lose again tonight to the Magic, I'm just going to say, I mean, they have at least, what, 50 or so more games. So Embiid's been playing his butt off so far. He's basically squeaking into MVP status again. So if he gets some days off for a bad ankle, I'm not even gonna be mad at him anymore because at this point, I think he's proven to everybody that he still loves to play this game. And I'm sticking to what I felt this early this year. It's like I'm not gonna get excited about them. I'm just gonna be happy for every win, but I'm keeping arm's length away from hoping past playoffs. I really am. Unfortunately, we have this theme with our teams right now that we can't trust them past a certain point, but so be it. Just appreciate every day like you should in general in life, you know? Don't take each day for granted. Just be thankful. Namaste. And with that, since my co-ed wasn't able to get on, I have a feeling he'll probably text me later and say, I missed your text. But if he doesn't, it's fine. Birds of a feather, AJ, Suburban Princess, I'm out. We'll be back, I'm sure, this weekend to discuss the win. And if not, I'll be back. So hope you enjoyed your holidays. Happy Kwanzaa. Today is the principle of Kujichagulia, which is self-determination. So I hope you were determined enough to get through your work day and vacation day. And yeah, we're about four days away from 2024. How about it? All right, thanks for watching either way. Birds of a feather, AJ from Princess. I am out. Holla.